welcome to this week's Wildlife Matters podcast. I'm your host, Nigel Palmer. In today's bonus episode, we will look back over our first 50, yes, 50 episodes, that is 4 complete series of the Wildlife Matters podcast, and chat through some of the highlights and the challenges and celebrate the fantastic wildlife, some of the incredible people we have spoken to, and discuss what it's been like to start a podcast and build a community from scratch. But first, it's been another hectic week for wildlife and nature here in the UK. So let's head over to the news desk for the latest news on this week's Wildlife Matters and Nature News. Hello and welcome to this week's Wildlife Matters Nature News. Our first story is DEFRA's new BTB strategy that has sparked controversy yet again over the badger culls. The Labour government's fresh initiative to tackle bovine tuberculosis in England has stirred up significant debate and controversy once again. DEFRA's proposal to end badger culling by the end of the current Parliament and enhance disease surveillance has led to a national day of action against the badger cull staged outside Parliament in London. The event was organised by the Badger Trust, a leading voice in badger conservation, and driven by campaigners demanding an immediate halt to the badger culls. The Born Free Foundation has urged alternative measures, pointing to Wales as an example of successful cattle-focused interventions. Meanwhile, the farmers and veterinary groups continue to claim the importance of culling within a broader strategy and their hope to eradicate bovine TB by 2038. The new plan marks a pivotal moment in the fight against bovine TB, offering hope with the declining infection rates. Christine Middlemiss, the UK's Chief Veterinary Officer, underlined the need for inclusive collaboration among government officials, scientists, vets and farmers. Key elements of the strategy now include badger population surveys, new surveillance for the remaining badger population, and the formation of a badger vaccinator field force. This force, comprising trained professionals, will administer vaccinations to the badger population, which is said to be a crucial step in controlling the spread of bovine TB. Additionally, the strategy includes accelerated efforts to make a cattle vaccine. Now, despite efforts for collaborative development, the strategy has faced resistance from all sides. The British Cattle Veterinary Association noted the need for policy updates, but expressed disappointment over the decision to phase out culling. Tom Bradshaw, the president of the National Farmers Union, echoed these concerns, highlighting the culling programme's historical successes. The government aims to balance perspectives, but the Badger Trust and other conservation groups remain steadfast in their opposition, labelling further culling as inhumane. Sir Brian May's recent TV documentary clearly showed slurry's role in the spread of bovine TB and that the disease is endemic within the cattle herd. Until we face the reality that farmers need to clean up their farms and be incentivized to use better testing to find disease in their herd, we will never end the scourge of bovine TB. Our second story is about climate offset work currently being carried out by Essex Wildlife Trust on the coast near Colchester. The Essex Wildlife Trust is warning that urgent action is needed to protect and restore salt marshes as part of efforts to store carbon and address the climate and nature crisis. A new report emphasises the importance of coastal habitats, such as salt marshes, in storing carbon. Most of the carbon stored in the UK's seas is found in the seabed sediment. Essex Wildlife Trust is actively working to preserve natural salt marshes, create new wildlife habitats that store carbon and mitigate the impact of climate change at the Abbots Hall Nature Reserve on the Blackwater Estuary near Colchester. Experts caution that 85% of the UK's salt marshes have been lost since the mid-19th century, and the remaining ones are under threat from coastal development, agricultural runoff, sewage pollution, and the effects of climate change, including extreme storms and rising sea levels. A managed realignment initiative at Abbots Hall in 2002 involved breaching old seawalls to create a new sea marsh and intertidal habitat, coastal grassland, and a freshwater lake covering nearly 50 hectares. In addition to providing a habitat for wildlife and storing carbon, the project aimed to protect the nearby village of Salcott from coastal flooding by allowing seawater to enter before reaching the town. The newly created habitat is home to a variety of wildlife, including juvenile European bass, grey mullet and common goby species in the water channels and pools, as well as bird species such as the marsh harrier, Brent geese, shoveler and teal duck, redshank and short-eared owls. And our third story this week is exciting news from the Humber Forest, part of the new Northern Forest, which has now planted over 400,000 trees and hedgerow plants. Humber Forest has planted many trees in the last 12 months, over 238,000 this year across Hull, East Yorkshire and the northern part of Lincolnshire. Since the project began 3 years ago, over 400,000 trees have now been planted across the region. Humber Forest, supported by DEFRA, is the community forest for Hull, East Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire. It is one of 15 community forests across England and part of the more prominent Northern Forest that stretches from Liverpool to the Yorkshire coast. The project provides grants to cover up to 100% of funding for planting and at least 5 years of maintenance for farmers, landowners, businesses and communities to plant hedgerows or trees on their land. These trees can play a vital role in reducing soil erosion and flooding, improving air quality, creating habitats for wildlife, and improving community spaces. One landowner in Ackborough approached the Humber Forest group to see if hedgerows could be planted to help wildlife recovery and improve the local environment. And the planting took place over 8 days across 4 sites. Volunteers planted 2,006 metres of hedgerow, consisting of 10,030 saplings and 122 standard trees. Beyond the benefits they bring to wildlife, hedgerows will play an essential role on the farmland, ensuring soils remain healthy and reducing the impact of drought and flooding. Tree and hedgerow planting in the Humber Forest is supported by the Trees for Climate and Northern Forest Growback Greener funds, which are part of the DEFRA Nature for Climate Fund. And that has been this week's Wildlife Matters Nature News. Now it's time for this week's Wildlife Matters Mindful Moments. You join me today walking along the River Lavant, my local chalk stream and a globally rare habitat. Today we're following the river from its source at Eastdean to the town of Chichester, and it gives me a chance to talk a little about chalk streams, a subject we will be returning to in a future episode. The chalk streams here in the South Downs differ from chalk rivers like Hampshire's River Itchen. You see, the River Lavant and the other Sussex chalk streams have their source high in the South Downs, making the gradient much steeper. This is what sets the South Downs chalk streams apart from other chalk streams in the UK. Sussex chalk streams often occur in small, natural gullies, which are more wooded than most other UK chalk rivers or streams. And this results in unusual features, including mini chalk waterfalls, which form when the chalk water upwellings calcify in the air. The dense shade also means that there is naturally less wetland plant cover. But for now, on this week's Wildlife Matters Mindful Moments, let's stop and sit down whilst we take a few moments to listen to the River Lavant as it flows across a pebble bed with some large rocks just below me. Well, I hope you enjoyed the soothing sounds of the crystal clear waters of the River Lavant. Chalk streams like the Lavant are known as winterborns, meaning that they flow seasonally. In contrast, others are known as perennial, meaning they flow permanently, and depending on the seasonal changes in their groundwater sources. Some characteristic plants you might expect to find in a chalk winterborn are the peppery, almost wasabi taste of watercress. Maybe fool's watercress that looks similar but smells of carrot and is a completely different plant family. And water speedwell, said in the past to be a diuretic that also cleans the blood and was a cure for scurvy, hence the speed you well back to health name. And Glyceria, also known as reed sweetgrass, a marginal that is great for oxygenating. But now it's time for us to take a nostalgic look back and chat about the first 50 episodes. In this, episode number 52, completing our 4th series of the Wildlife Matters podcast. Hello and welcome to this week's Wildlife Matters main feature. And today it's about Wildlife Matters at 50. Can you believe it? Reaching 50 episodes is a huge milestone. Welcome to our review of over 50 episodes of the Wildlife Matters podcast. This also answers most of the questions you sent me for the Q&A you asked for. And I thought it would be a good idea to combine them into our 50th celebrations. But first, let me start by answering the most asked question, which was, why a podcast? Now, I'm going to start by giving you some general podcast stats from 2024. Because you see, the podcast landscape is booming, with millions tuning in for their fix of audio entertainment and education. Here are a few of the top podcast stats that may surprise you. There are over 464 million podcast listeners worldwide, which is projected to reach over 500 million by the end of 2024. On average, podcast listeners spend 7 hours a week listening to their favorite podcasts. In the podcast world, episodes between 20 and 40 minutes reign supreme. Tick Wildlife Matters. And podcasting isn't just an American phenomenon. Although the US has the largest number of podcast listeners in the world, Sweden and Norway have the highest number of monthly listeners by percentage of internet users. YouTube video podcasts are rising, offering a new dimension in audio storytelling. And that's why Wildlife Matters has launched a YouTube channel with video versions of the podcast. As we develop our content and storytelling, we will bring you more wildlife videos in the future. Spotify and Apple Podcasts lead the pack, battling for global audio dominance. Peak listening time is in the morning, with most episodes enjoyed on mobile devices. Podcast enthusiasts discover new content through various channels, but around 40% of listeners explore new podcasts using the in-app search bars. The go-to device for podcasts is, of course, the smartphone, with 73% of users choosing it, while laptop and desktop lag behind at only 13%. The other devices used to listen to podcasts include tablets, digital music players, and voice-activated speakers. People mainly listen to podcasts through their headphones at 71%, while the rest, or 29% of you, are listening through speakers. To understand why podcasts have grown in popularity, let's examine when people listen and what they're doing while they're listening. Surprisingly, 59% of people listen to podcasts while they're doing something else. So what are you doing right now? 32% tune in while driving or traveling, while 59% listen to podcasts when they're at home. Now, one of my primary reasons for starting the podcast was that we could quickly reach people worldwide, specifically the younger generation, who need to be added to our wildlife supporter networks. So I was delighted to learn that 66% of podcast listeners are aged between 12 and 34. Now, if that's you, please do drop us a line and say hello. In the same study, 43% of podcast listeners are aged between 35 and 54, making them the fastest growing listener age group. Over 25% of podcast listeners are aged over 55, whilst 28% of those aged 65 and over do listen to podcasts. In the UK, 53% of podcast listeners are male and 47% are female. Podcasts are popular worldwide, but some countries spend more time listening than others. These are the top listening countries for podcasts in 2024. The United States leads the way with 40% of monthly listeners. Then it's Sweden on 34.6%, Norway 34.2%, Australia 33.2%, and Canada rounds out the top five with 32%. 27.8%. The UK, where I'm based, are ninth with 27.8% of the population listening to podcasts. While Spotify is the go-to platform for streaming podcasts, the majority of podcast downloads, or over 70%, occur through Apple Podcasts. Spotify users download much less, using just 8.9% of download requests. These are general podcast stats taken from a worldwide survey in 2023. Podcasts have a considerable impact. Many enjoy listening to them for entertainment and education. Now, we would love to hear why you listen and share the other podcasts that you enjoy regularly. Now it's time to take a look back over the first 4 series on this, the 52nd episode of the Wildlife Matters podcast. Now, it feels strange reflecting on my work and passion in public, and perhaps that is one of the reasons I preferred to review our first 50 episodes rather than do a standalone Q&A that so many of you have asked for. Wildlife Matters' journey started with a lifelong love of wildlife and an appreciation of nature and the natural world that we share with animals. It also comes from a deeply held belief that we are all animals, and a massive aversion to those who take pleasure in hunting or persecuting them for their fur and body parts, testing medications and inflicting diseases on them, or forcing them to perform for our entertainment. So, reflecting on the journey, when I started this podcast, I had a vision. I dreamt of creating a community of wildlife and nature lovers where we could talk about and celebrate wildlife and the wonders of the natural world. I wanted to share stories to inspire and to help each other grow. I never imagined we'd reach this incredible milestone of 50 plus episodes. But it's not only 52 episodes or 4 series, but as you will find out as we go along, I am so proud to have created a passionate and engaged community that will take action and like to celebrate wildlife and the natural world. We will use our collective voice now to benefit wildlife and the natural world, and continue to share each other's stories and grow into a genuine force for good. It's been a journey filled with ups and downs, moments of doubt, but most importantly, moments of pure joy. And we've had some incredible conversations with inspiring guests, and I'm so grateful to each of them for being such a vital part of our journey. And in Series 5, we will bring you more conversations with people working with or for wildlife and nature. So, why does wildlife matter? Well, from the beginning, the goal was to build a community based on mutual love and appreciation of wildlife and nature, sharing stories and experiences to engage, motivate and inspire others to follow their passion and belief, and to help wildlife and nature in their own unique way. Wildlife Matters was born from a passion and a lifelong love for wildlife and the natural world. With over 30 years now of experience working for wildlife and conservation charities in the UK, Africa and Asia, I have gained invaluable insights into species protection, conservation and habitat management. I have a profound love for plants and trees and all aspects of nature, including habitats, oceans, rivers, but our absolute passion is wildlife species. In addition, our practical experience in woodland management and horticulture has given us the tools to make a difference in the fight to protect our natural world. I have hands-on experience working with sick and injured animals on the front line in a busy wildlife rescue. And for over 40 years, I have, along with many others, taken direct action against fox hunters and anyone who persecutes wildlife for so-called sport. Our knowledge and experience are as diverse and varied as they are abroad. British wildlife is not only beautiful and unique, but it's also fascinating and varied. While our mammals may not be the largest, they possess unique qualities and live in a wide range of habitats, including the beautiful bat species, the UK's only flying mammals. Our bird life is abundant, with many new species from southern Europe joining us in recent years. My personal bird passion lies in raptors, including owls and corvids. Still, we always remember reptiles, amphibians, and insects as the foundation of biodiverse habitats, leading fascinating lives in unique places. The Wildlife Matters community Wildlife Matters is dedicated to building a community of nature and wildlife enthusiasts. We believe that a podcast is the best way to achieve this. Our podcast serves as the beating heart of our community. It will explore the successes, problems, and challenges facing wildlife and the natural world every episode. It also provides an instant way to connect with our audience and respond to situations as and when they happen. We use our platform to share stories, adventures, and experiences in nature, as well as to look at incredible wildlife and share some of its secrets. We will also give as many wildlife groups a platform and a voice to inform others of their work or campaigns. And of course, we will continue to advocate and urge the British government to fulfil its wildlife commitments. Our primary goals are to achieve a complete ban on blood hunting with packs of dogs, to end the ineffective badger culls and driven grouse shooting, whilst we work to eliminate wildlife crime, which has become a significant problem once again in many parts of the UK in recent years. We are passionate about being a platform for direct action group that work tirelessly to prevent blood hunters and those who intentionally harm or destroy our wildlife and natural habitats. Our community is always open to hearing about any wildlife issues that you want us to cover. And we aim to share information with those just discovering and starting their journey to find how fantastic wildlife and nature can be, whilst entertaining those with more knowledge and experience. So, building a community. Well, we plan to launch a Facebook group to help us share and connect. And right now, our community is mainly based in the UK, but we have regular listeners worldwide. So let's have a shout out and a round of applause for our community in the USA. And hi to those in Australia and New Zealand, India, and hola to everyone in Spain, Brazil, and Mexico. We are proud to have so many listeners in South America. Coming a little closer to home, here in Europe, let's say hi to our friends in Germany, Sweden, Norway, Ireland, Greece. They are our top 5 European countries, and of course, everyone else in Europe. The community means everything to us. So thanks go to you for listening to our humble little podcast wherever and however you listen. You are always welcome. Your support, feedback, and enthusiasm do mean the world to me. For those who've been with me since episode 1, you all deserve a special mention. You've stuck with me through episodes where the audio was just shit-tastic and the production was non-existent. But somehow you stayed with me. Our first episode, an introduction to Wildlife Matters, a 10-minute podcast outlining my dreams and hopes for the podcast, has now been downloaded an incredible 20,000 times. And that's just bloody amazing. To everyone who listens, thank you for being on this journey with me. So, what are our lessons learned? Well, running a podcast is a lot of work. I research, write, record, and produce the podcast myself. And it takes around 16 to 20 hours per episode, not including the time I spend planning my stories and traveling around the UK to meet, interview people, or to create the adventures to share with you. I've always tried to keep things natural, transparent, and honest. And that's why we have never had paid sponsors or adverts on the podcast. But it has been challenging at times. When I started, I was nervous and unsure of the future. But I knew one thing. I wanted to create a space for people to celebrate and enjoy the beauty and the endless fascination of wildlife and nature. And that's precisely what we have done. You wouldn't believe the steep learning curve of technical challenges, from building and writing a website that could take the podcast from an RSS feed to learning SEO and audio editing. More recently, I've been working on iMovie as I learn to edit the videos. I've been making my own for the last few months. The video production learning curve has been relentless, as it is steep, from setting up camera shots to getting B-roll and learning to fly a drone. Add that to the setting up of donation platforms and shops that will hopefully one day help to fund the costs of making the podcast, which has been entirely self-financed so far. And of course, learning Canva to make our social media even more appealing. There have been many moments of self-doubt, moments of questioning my sanity, whether my finances will hold out and whether my freelancing will pay the bills next month. Yes, I still work up to 4 days a week to pay the bills, but we've persevered. And together, we have driven the Wildlife Matters podcast into the top 10 nature podcasts. Thank you so much. Throughout this journey, I've had the pleasure of speaking to some amazing people, such as Lucy Steele from Wild Things Rescue, General Wildlife Rescue based in Lincolnshire, Deborah from Hedge Pigs, a dedicated hedgehog rescue in Nottingham, and Natalia from London-based Urban Squirrels, a dedicated grey squirrel rescue, and the excellent Maya, currently studying wildlife at college, who is dedicated to amphibians and reptiles and runs the tow patrols for the Knots Amphibian and Reptile Group. Many of my chats were made possible by partnering with One Voice for Animals and their founder, Val Green, who we chatted with in Series 3. These conversations have added a new dimension to the podcast, and I love connecting with people. We will chat with many more fantastic folk who run their rescues and are part of the One Voice for Animals network that Val set up to support small, independent animal rescues here in the UK. Please do visit their website to find out more. The website address is www.helpanimals.co.uk, and I will put that in the show notes. Well, one of the most rewarding parts of the podcast has been the opportunity to highlight some of the many issues that are so important to us all, such as ending hunting with packs of dogs and the cruel and ineffective badger culls. We have produced several episodes on both subjects, with the truth about fox hunting and why is the British government still killing badgers being the most listened to. Wildlife species have always been a passion of mine. We have looked at badgers and foxes through spring and winter and have upcoming summer and autumn episodes for both species. Along with the beautiful badgers and the fabulous foxes, our episodes on the humble hedgehog have proved really popular. And I was delighted when the episode and introduction to British bats, which we published in June this year, reached over 8,500 downloads. One of our earliest episodes was In Defense of the Grey Squirrel, which took an in-depth look at how squirrels have been persecuted for decades and how some of our wildlife organisations are killing grey squirrels they claim to protect reds, which is complete rubbish. That is our third most listened to episode, and one I am incredibly proud of, but not the early audio quality and production. I would very much like to revisit it with improved audio and output. Of course, all species are equal, so we don't only highlight mammals, we have also looked at frogs, stag beetles and wild honeybees, not to mention many wild flowers, fungi and trees. I was so pleased that our recent adventure to discover some of Britain's rarest wildflowers has made it into our most listened to episodes list today. Another episode I am proud of from this year is Why Are Our Rivers Dying?, which examines river pollution from agricultural runoff to raw human sewage discharges. I was able to chat about how we are helping volunteers test water quality in rivers. And that work has moved on, and I'm excited to bring you a new episode looking at the impact of pollution on Britain's chalk streams, one of the rarest forms of river habitats, as most chalk streams in the world are here in the UK. I have experimented with bringing you a range of content from Wildlife Matters Investigates, where we work with the direct action groups to all go undercover to expose wildlife persecution and cruelty, to the more serene walk and talk days exploring some incredible wildlife habitats, species and places. In the new year, we will bring you a new series called Britain's Wildest Cities, which looks at urban wildlife. We have had some great adventures this summer and we are really excited to share them with you. The most surprising but rewarding episode was when I tried storytelling by telling nature-related folk stories. The first one was in October 23 when I shared the story of Mabon, a traditional folk tale about King Arthur. To my amazement, it is our fourth most listened to episode. And I was so motivated by your response that I decided to develop my storytelling, which I began online during the lockdowns. I have launched a separate podcast called The Nature Storyteller, which is dedicated to sharing folklore stories from nature. And you will find it on all good podcast platforms, and it has its own website, which is www.naturestoryteller.org. And my storytelling has moved on rapidly in the last year. I was proud and surprised to win the Newcomer of the Year award at my age and complete a 5-night tour in the spring to launch myself into the world of storytelling. I have written my own stories, such as A Pheasant Called Francis and The Puzzle Hall, with its clear anti-fox hunting theme, at 6 festivals this year, and will be publishing my first folklore storybook hopefully in 2025. Exciting times, and sincere thanks for your early support, which led me to enjoy being creative and share stories. I want Wildlife Matters to be more than just a podcast. I want it to feel like family, a community. So let's keep the conversation going. Please share your wildlife and nature experiences with me, ask questions and leave comments. Because together we can make this journey even more informative and exciting. As we celebrate 50 episodes and the end of Series 4, I'm filled with gratitude. We've covered many topics, learned so much together, and built an incredible community. I'm excited about the future. Series 5 begins in 2 weeks and will take us through autumn and winter seasons with more exciting topics, new guests, and exciting stories to share. As we celebrate 50 episodes and the end of Series 4, I'm filled with excitement and with gratitude. We've covered many topics, learned so much, and built an incredible community. And I'm excited about the future. Series 5 begins in 2 weeks and will take us through the autumn and winter seasons with more exciting topics, with new guests, and with more stories to share. I want to thank my family and friends for your unwavering support, and a big thank you to the amazing guests who have shared their knowledge and experiences with us so far. But most importantly, I want to thank you, our listeners, because we couldn't have done this without you. So here's to the journey we've been on, the lessons we've learned, and the community we've built. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with a new Series 5. Thank you for being part of this incredible journey. I'm your host, Nigel Palmer, and for the 50th time, this is Wildlife Matters signing off.